So I'm going to do some talking on a little bit of a Texas-centric view, just a few slides just to give some folks some basics. I know some people are probably very knowledgeable on monarchs, not just Texas, but beyond. But I guess I'm going to go ahead and thank people for coming, first off. And I know that some people are coming from out of state. How many people are coming from out of state? So 3. We have more coming. So, but this is a big deal for us, for the Austin Butterfly Forum. We're the oldest butterfly club in Texas. And so we've been in existence since '93, and so we're just over 20 years now. And I wanted to do this in part to share knowledge of about the monarch butterfly, but also as thank you for all of our members that have supported us for the 20 years that we've been in existence. And so I want to thank our members, our board of directors. I think they're still out there helping people. And we have a small cadre of volunteers that are extremely helpful as well. So let me see if I can just kind of launch into some Texas monarch info. And Lincoln should be here 10 minutes. 10, 15 minutes. So I hope I can count on your patience for that. So just a very broad overview, because Lincoln's going to go into great detail. But this is Fred Urquhart, and he and Nora up at the University of Toronto tagged hundreds of thousands monarchs, started experimenting in 1937 and really got going in the 60s, and in the 70s they placed ads in Mexico City and other cities in the country of Mexico. And in 1975, Kenneth and Catalina Brugger were able to find some of the first colonies, and they found a couple there. And so again, folks are probably familiar with a lot of the tagging data. Not as much data of the movements is known on California. A lot of the data that Lincoln's that Urquhart has compiled is now online thanks to Monarch Watch. And so this is a fairly famous publication in terms of entomology. People have been looking for the overwintering grounds of the monarchs for over 100 years before they were found. We'd made multiple trips to the moon and back before we found where the monarch overwintering colonies were. And Catalina will be our guest tomorrow evening, and she was at some of the field trips as well. And she couldn't make it here today. But Lincoln Brower was working on monarch starting in the field of chemical ecology, and Bill Calvert was one of his postgraduate students, and they were very interested in monarchs and have been to this day. And just, one of the amazing counterintuitive things that Lincoln studied and the data determined were that the monarchs, when they start, ignore Florida here, but let's go Massachusetts, New Jersey, Kansas, the percent of their samples were, in terms of the mass, they were light on mass, most of them at north. So when they emerge, they're light. And as they migrate south through Texas and into Mexico in October, they gain lipid weight, and then as they're overwintering, they're losing, and then losing even more when they come back. So they're actually, the counterintuitive part is that they gain weight as they migrate across the continent. So really fascinating. And this was some Brower's work in 1985. So here's another graphical expression of this, pretty much the same data. Monarchs leave upper Midwest in August and come through Texas in October, arrive in Mexico, central Mexico, and overwinter, and then they're on their way back. So I assume some folks are already seeing them here. How many people have seen a monarch this year? Oh, about 20% or so, so that's great. So this is, they build up and then they're in hibernation, the insect entomological equivalent of hibernation, and then they're on fumes here when they come back. And they can make it, some of them that overwinter start in southern Canada, and then they can even make it all the way back to Kansas. So that's quite the migration. And so there's many different representations of the migration route, and we're not going to get into any of that other than Texas perspective. And so Monarch Watch was initiated in 1972, and Texas Monarch Watch through Bill Calvert and Texas Parks and Wildlife was started the following year. And they've worked together for quite some time. And so this was some of the early work that Bill compiled using before, this was even before Master Naturalist, but basically the size of the dot is relates to the size of the estimated size of the number of monarchs. So basically the monarchs are coming through right here, and then there's some along the coast. And so this was data collected in mid-90s. And so we stylistically refer to that as the central flyway and then the coastal flyway, which is actually really right along the coast. This line here should be like right there. And so I got see if I can check this, their progress with, okay, they're in the car, so I thought they were further along than that, so I could slow down my, take it long. So, all right, so this is no other state really breaks the migration down into these different flyways, even, because this is like from Louisiana here and Oklahoma here, and but we really see these patterns, and Bill saw them in the 90s, and then this is some data that I worked on compiling, and so we had observations, and these are estimates, over 10,000 monarchs seen at one place at one time, over the course of a day, I guess would be the best way. So again, coming right through, basically from I-35 out to Midland, there's a dearth of observers in here, but I want to emphasize that these data aren't significantly biased towards the population centers. So we got, Dallas is there, but we got a ton of observations here and here where there aren't a lot of people, and we got Travis and Bexar counties that aren't in the highest class. So these data are particularly interesting because they're not just, the more observers, the more observations you got. That's not what the data show. So the other thing is the the date, and this is the fall migration where the monarchs are following a tailwinds from, they're getting the northers, and they can move great distances with a good strong southbound wind. And so we get right here in central Texas, mid-October is kind of our peak time. And the spring migration is very different. They don't follow these flyways, and they are much slower going north because they're running into cold weather up north. And here the impetus is just to blow on through and get down to the overwintering colonies where it's high mountain region. So that's that high cold, but not too cold temperature, the Three Bears just right kind of scenario in Mexico that allows them to conserve their fat reserves as much as possible without getting into the freezing temperatures. In Dallas, even we can see good numbers of monarchs, and people call me up and say, hey, can you come get these monarchs? As I can't get any work done, and I'm like, well, if you stop calling me, I could get some work done. No, the migration along the I-35 corridor is kind of hit or miss. They can these timelines are pretty good, but it's biology, right? So there's a lot of variation. So they can sometimes be heavy along the I-35, but more consistently they're coming down through Wichita Falls and Abilene and San Angelo and Del Rio. So that's the heart of the fall flyway. And then we have after the central flyway peters out, the coastal flyway picks up. And just left in a few slides to talk about that. So any talk on monarchs is going to have copious numbers of maps and data that Journey North compiled. And they've been really instrumental in helping scientists and from first grade on up to everyone in this room's age. And so these are, as the season progresses, the color of the observation point changes. So late season, this is classic, coming right through the central flyway here. And so this was mid-October, and then late October, there's no more activity here, and now we're into the green coded observation points, and so it's coming right along the Gulf Coast there. And so one of the amazing aspects of monarch migration is how does this monarch right here know to come here, and this one out here also know to come here. And so they can determine their latitude more easily than their longitude. And I think that these over here don't know as well as we might think. They are not flying straight here. I think that a lot of these, they just all fly south, and so you get movement through the Great Plains. This is kind of the center of the monarch breeding populations in the upper Midwest in the late fall, or late summer, early fall. And then I think a lot of these, they come and hit the Gulf Coast, and then that's why you get concentrations right along the Gulf. And that's also why this migration flyway follows after the central flyway. So these are coming through, these are coming and then hitting and then coming around. So that's my interpretation of the dual flyways that we have here in Texas. So this is Elizabeth Howard, and she has been instrumental in helping people understand a great deal about monarchs. And right now, you can see there's maps of the monarchs coming back from Mexico, and they're right now across central Texas, certainly from maybe Abilene to Houston there. Whoops, wrong. Okay, so this is jumping ahead to the return migration, and this is just 1 year here, 2010, and so we're the white, and then we got yellow follows up, and so here we do see clusters around population centers. So the more observers, the more observations you get. So we got Houston, Dallas, or Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas there. So, as I said, they don't follow a flyway coming through in the north, or yeah, coming back in the north. If I might go back, so there's the Ozark Mountains right here, and so that might deflect them a little bit. And another caveat is that there's a lot more trees right there, so seeing a monarch is a little more difficult. Seeing the insect for the trees issues, and you have that in here as well. So, that could, so there may be more movement through here than we're getting observations for, basically. But I like the Ozarks can kind of maybe funnel them down through the central flyway there. So this is really fascinating data. I know it just jumps out at you, right? So this is data that Chip Taylor, who's started Monarch Watch out of the University of Kansas. And so this is Texas March data. And so this is the temperature. Here's so the way we measure monarchs, the annual benchmark, of course, is the amount of forest that is occupied in state of Michoacan in central Mexico. And so this is the hectares of forest occupied. And so this is up numbers, and these are lower numbers from year to year. And so here's the temperature. So warm temperatures have consistently shown a warm temperature in spring migration through Texas shows a lower population in Mexico the following year. And that is amazing. And so right now, you felt how cold it is. So we're getting cool weather, so this is good. Cool weather, you think, oh my gosh, they're trying to come through and eat, and how are they going to make? If they're warm, they'll, there's probably a lot of different reasons, but if it's warmer, they can burn off their fat reserves more quickly and not be able to reproduce as much. But if it's cool, they can sustain their fat reserves more. So that's one of the more obvious probable causes for that. But that is just amazing. That, again, just shows the centrality of Texas to the monarch's overall biology, even though we think of them just passing through. So just kind of closing here with some of the milkweed species that we have. This is, 20 or so species in Texas, but really only a few that the monarchs preferentially host on. And one of the primary ones is Asclepius asperula. And, they all have different common names, but I always called this antelope horn. And so here's a rough distribution of the asperula. And this is pretty much the dominant western species of milkweed. And so this is hill country highway, and milkweed doesn't like a lot of competition, and so this is ideal mowing before the milkweed comes up there. And then Asclepius viridis is the dominant eastern species, and it's a little more recumbent. And so those two are kind of the east-west dominant species, viridis. And then the third species that's a little more in south and also west and central and such, but Asclepius enothyroides, and often called zotis, milkweed. So these are the, Damon Waite here at the Wildflower Center used a term I hadn't heard before. He said milkweed is recalcitrant. The native species are recalcitrant in terms of propagating them and getting the seeds to germinate and transplanting and just a variety of problems that we don't really see with the tropical milkweed. And there's, as soon as you talk about tropical milkweed, we could go the rest of the night on that probably. But the tropical milkweed is the dominant species in Mexico, and it's the species that the monarch primarily evolved with. And all right, I think we've got Elvis is in the building. So my time, I'm a short timer here. So tropical milkweed, it's self-compatible. The seeds germinate easily. It doesn't have the tuberous root, so it's much easier. And if you go to the nurseries, I say, hey, I need some milkweed. They'll bring you out some tropical milkweed. It's not native this far north, and there's some problems with it, particularly in South Florida with a protozoan that's a pest on the monarch. But the South Florida population of monarchs are non-migratory, so that protozoan population builds up more in South Florida. And here, where the monarchs are migrating through, I don't believe it's been documented that there's a significant problem with tropical milkweed. That's my view. Lincoln you can feel free to ask Lincoln anything to check anything I've said. So, all right. So this is, incidentally, this is a wild type. This is if you go down into the interior of Mexico and encounter tropical milkweed. This is what you might see, and that's fairly different from what we see in the nursery trade, which is hundreds, if not thousands, of generations removed from the wild type. But the problem with the getting tropical milkweed, what are these critters right here? Aphids. That plant is not going to, nobody wants to buy that plant with all those, it's already infested. So the nursery folks, or the people that supply the nursery people, will often use a systemic insecticide. And so if you see a clean milkweed, it's a little bit suspicious. If you see a few aphids, that's a good thing because they're on there.